Welcome to Texas Farmstead Living. I'm Caren. Today's video is part 3 of our series, Everything You Need to Know to Buy Half or Whole Beef. In parts 1 and 2, you learned information that will help you in the decision-making process when buying beef. And now I assume you have made a decision and we're ready to proceed to part 3. In part 3, you're going to learn step by step the whole process from reserving your beef to beef in your freezer. In the second half of this video, I am going to show you how to fill out a beef cut sheet. So check below if you want to see the timestamp. I've broken this process down into 10 steps. Number 1 is most ranchers will require you to make a deposit to reserve your beef. Number 2 is you or the rancher will call the processor and make an appointment. This could vary anywhere from a few weeks to several months, and in the case right now, it is a year in advance. Number 3, anywhere from 1 month to a few days before harvest date, you will fill out a beef cut sheet. Now, your rancher or your processor will be glad to help you through the process. You always want to make sure you have an up-to-date cut sheet and price sheet from your processor. And also, I've linked below some great resources that gives you lots of great information about cuts of beef and how to cook beef. Number 4, now it's time to turn in the cut sheet. There's a couple of different methods that different ranchers use. Some ranchers will want you to bring your cut sheet to the harvest date and meet you at the processor. You know, they'll want to review it with you, and they will want the processor involved to review your cut sheet with you. Other ranchers, you can just email your cut sheet directly to them, and they will take the cut sheet with them to harvest date. And also, another way is you can email your cut sheet directly to the processor, but you'll just need to check with your rancher and see what his process for doing that is. Number 5 is harvest day. Harvest day is the day that the rancher will deliver the calf to the processor to be harvested. It's always best if your rancher can be first in line. This will minimize stress. The same day, or maybe a few days later, the processor will contact the rancher and let them know the hanging weight, the actual hanging weight. Up until now, we have just been projecting and estimating yield and cost. But now you have actual numbers, and you can actually do a real calculation to see the yield and price of your beef. It's important at this point to understand kind of what your take home will be, so that you can make sure that you have freezer space and that you are all organized and ready to accept the amount of beef that you'll be taking home. Number 6, once the animal is dropped off at the processor, you become the client of the processor. So feel free to ask them any questions. You know, they will probably call you direct for any questions that they have about your cut sheet. Number 7, at this stage in the process, your beef is being aged, cut, wrapped, and frozen. This time period can vary depending on the amount of time that you chose to have your beef aged. Now, what is typical? Most processors will age for free up to 14 days, but anything after 14 days, they will charge you an additional fee. Number 8, your beef is ready for pickup. Most likely, the processor will call you directly and let you know that your order is ready. I highly encourage you to make an appointment for beef pickup. I also want to point out that most processors will charge you a fee per box per day after a certain amount of time, such as after 7 days. So you want to make sure that you pick up your beef as quickly as possible. Number 9 is beef pickup day. A lot of ranchers will want to meet you at the processor on the day you pick your beef up. So the way it works when you go pick up your beef is you tell them your name. They will send someone to the freezer to gather your boxes. They will bring them back to the front and they will scan them and count them and make sure that everything with your name is together in one spot. Then they will load them in the car for you, and then you're on your way home. When you go to pick up your beef, it's a good idea to bring some blankets with you if it's hot weather. This will help insulate the boxes and keep them frozen until you can get them into your freezer. Number 10, we're going to talk about freezers. So it is very important at the planning phase of buying beef that you understand that you have an adequate freezer space to store your beef. What you don't want to happen is you do not do a estimated projected amount of beef and you don't have the space, because right now it's very hard to buy a freezer. So I recommend the chest freezers because I've heard a lot of sad stories about people that have left their doors open and all of their beef will ruin. I also like when they have the dividers in the chest and the sliding doors. That's really helpful. So we recommend 30 pounds of beef per cubic foot of freezer space. You also will save some space if you take your beef out of the boxes. Now I'm going to show you how to fill out a beef cut sheet. But first I want you to go to a website and get familiar with the cuts of beef. So we're going to go to beef, it's what's for dinner. And we're going to go to the cuts area and then scroll down and you will see view the primal cuts. So if you'll go through and click on each of these primals, is what they're called, it will tell you, what cuts are within that primal. So for instance, the rib primal, it tells you where it is. You can see that, and it says it's a popular cuts from the rib include the rich, flavorful ribeye steak and the prime rib roast. So you can go through, scroll through, look for, look at the different cuts. Your cut sheet probably will not, have all, offer all of these cuts, but at least you can get a little familiar with where things are and the way they look. So like here's a ribeye roast, and I know you've heard of a ribeye steak. And if you get, you can get a bone in, like this, boned in ribeye steak. That's important. We're going to look at that on our cut sheet to know the difference. Bone in, boneless, right here, ribeye steak. So if you get boneless, you will get ribs, okay? Okay, so now let's go to our cut sheet, but I highly encourage you to look at this first. Here is an example of a beef cut sheet. Remember, each processor will have their own unique cut sheet, and it probably will not look like this one. This cut sheet is from a few years ago, but what we're going to do today is I've asked for an updated version for my processor, and we are going to fill out the cut sheet that I am going to turn in a couple of weeks to my processor. So here is my beef cut sheet. So first thing is you want to fill out your name and your contact information at the top, and I still need to do that. So you also want to find out from your processor if they offer paper or vacuum sealed packaging. Some of them will offer paper automatically, and they'll charge you an extra fee if you want, vacuum sealed packaging. So make sure you ask. That's not always on the cut sheet, so you definitely want to find out. So this processor charges $85 to harvest an animal and 95 cents a pound for the hanging weight. So they offer up to 14 days is included in the price. For dry aging and anything over, you're going to pay 10 cents per pound of carcass weight. Now remember, on part 2, if you'll go back, you can find out how to figure hanging weight, and that should help you. So I chose 7 days because my animal is younger, and on younger animals, you will want to dry age less than this 14 days. Okay, I do want to save the heart. I do want to save the liver, but I do have a question. I'm going to ask the processor, will they slice the liver for me? I do not want any stew meat, but if I did, they would charge me $1.50 per pound. On the brisket, I do want it saved and I want it whole. Now, if I did not want to save it, I would send it to trim, which means it's going to go to hamburger meat. On the chuck, I would like roast and I would like half. Now, some processors will offer where you can choose the number of pounds that you want your roast or the thickness. My processor, you have the option of whole or half. On the arm, I am going to choose roast also, and I want it half. Now remember, they offer to trim, which is always to hamburger meat. You will probably see a ribeye on your cut sheet. That's pretty much on all of the cut sheets. So I chose rib steak. So what that means is that's a ribeye with the bone in. So I chose steak, of course, right here, and I want 1 inch. Now, my processor, the thinnest cut that they'll do for steak is 3/4 of an inch. So you can choose 3/4 of an inch, 1 inch, 1.5 inch, and I would like 2 steaks per package. So if I had wanted a, I can choose a boneless ribeye, and if I did that, then I would get back ribs. See right here, if ribeye, back ribs. But I didn't. I chose bone in, so I don't get back ribs, so I didn't fill anything out here. Or if you don't want a ribeye or a rib steak, you can get a rib roast, and that would be like prime rib, something you may want to serve for Christmas. Now we're going to talk about the short ribs. I definitely want to save those. Those are delicious in stew, and I like the strips, and I have some great pictures of those. You probably will see the term short loin or T-bone on your beef cut sheet. So if you get a T-bone, which I am choosing a T-bone today, I would like it cut 1 inch thick, and I would like 2 per package. So there's no charge for them to, other than the 95 cents per hanging weight. There's no extra charge for T-bones. But if I had chosen to have New York strips and tenderloin, there were going to be some additional charges. So on a T-bone steak, one side of it is a New York strip and the other side is the tenderloin. So if I had decided I wanted New York strip and tenderloin, I would have, they're going to charge me $12.50 per carcass to cut those steaks. And on the tenderloin, it looks like they're going to charge $5 to have a whole or half tenderloin, and $7.50 if they cut them into filet mignons. But you want to make sure that you understand that it's T-bone or New York strip and tenderloin. For the sirloin, I am going to choose sirloin steaks, and I want them to be about 2 inches thick because I am going to make beef bourguignon with those, and I will be cutting it up into stew meat. So I would like 2 per package, but if I didn't want that, remember anything that when it says to trim, it will go to hamburger meat. Okay, fajita meat, which is skirt steak, I am sending mine to trim. Now there's the inside and the outside skirt, but it's delicious fajita meat, but I love hamburger meat, so I'm making, choosing to trim. On the flank steak, the same thing. It is, delicious for fajita meat, but I am sending it to trim for hamburger meat. But if you'll also note here that they're going to charge $1 per pound to tenderize these 2, cuts of meat. So you want to make sure that you understand, these are all little charges but can add up. Okay, in the round. So the round is at the back of the animal. I always just have that cut into roast, always. But you can also get like the round steaks, the cutlets, like for chicken fried steak. So that's what that means. And they're going to charge you, look at this, tenderizing fee. But if I did not want roast or steaks or like cutlets, I would just send it to trim for hamburger meat. The Pikes Peak roast is pretty large. It's got a lot of bone in it, so I'm going to get it cut in half this year. And remember, you always have the option of sending it to trim. Now on the rope roast, I am going to have that cut in half. When my kids were all home, I would have had it whole, but you'll just have to choose, depending on what size of family you have. So on soup bones are also called shank bones, also ossobuco, if that might sound familiar, but they're definitely so delicious. The meat in them is so tender and flavorful. You definitely want to keep it for broth or soups or stews. So I'm going to save that. Stock bones, now, that's one of my favorite parts. You'll want to, when you're going to use them for bone broth, they're going to come, in a bag, and I definitely want to save those, but the processor will probably charge you a fee per pound to cut those and bag those. But definitely worth saving. You don't want to miss out on getting your stock bones. Now we're to the very important subject of ground meat. So the first thing you'll need to decide is what size of package. So I like 1 pound packages, and I like it in chub. So here's a picture of a chub, but you also can get vacuum sealed packages, but they're going to charge you 50 cents per pound. You can get a label on your chub, and if they have to do a lot of trim because you want leaner, they're going to charge you. But one thing processors sometimes will offer is they'll make your ground meat into hamburger patties. Now I always make about half of my ground meat into hamburger patties. My processor offers 4 hamburger patties per pound, or 3 hamburger patties per pound, or 2 per pound. So I always choose the 1/4 pound option, and they will charge me $2.25 per pound to make hamburger patties. To me, definitely worth it. I love it, and I will continue to do that year after year. So a couple of things on your cut sheet. They don't always put on there everything that they offer. You might, like my favorite thing is beef tallow. So beef tallow is, they'll usually cut the fat from around the kidney, and it's real mild. You can make pastry with it, make cookies. I use it daily and substitute it for butter. But you don't want to miss out on that liquid gold. And I did create a video to show you how to render beef tallow. So make sure you go back and watch that. But there's a lot of different things that they will not, say on the cut sheet, but you definitely can ask. Like you might ask for the head or the tongue. There might be an organ that you've been wanting, the oxtail. But just keep in mind, go back to that website and learn all the different parts, and just ask your processor about it, because a lot of times it's just not listed because not many people want it, but you definitely can order it. One final thought before we close. Remember, our health is a reflection of what we eat. So it is so important and worth your time to learn everything you can about this process of having a beef processed, because this is something you would want to do year after year, because it is, I always recommend to people to start with sourcing their proteins first. I know it's hard to do everything at once, but if you can just find a rancher and source your beef, you will be so surprised the difference, and you will love it. We've gone through the cut sheet. If you have any questions, in the comments area below, just ask me. I want to remind you that these family processors are very rare, and There's there's not many left. There's, just like 4 companies own, most of the processors in the U.S., the large ones. And so these family processors, it's handcrafted. They usually are generational. And I just am always so grateful and thankful that they will process my meat. And they're experts. They do this every day and for many, many years. And so I give them, a lot of leadway in deciding what it is that I should order. So in 20 years, I've always loved on my orders. And I love having a freezer full of beef. There's nothing quite like it, food security and knowing where your food came from. I hope this helps. I know it can be confusing, but just stick with it. And after the first time you do this, by the second year, you will be an expert. I hope this video will help guide you through the process of buying a half or whole beef. And I hope I've inspired you to find a personal rancher. Please give our video a like, and we would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to our channel if you enjoy farmstead living. From our Texas Hill Country farmstead to you, have a blessed day, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.